You will note that on your desk you received a revised agenda. I just want to ask, is everybody happy to go with that revised agenda? Are there any objections? Everybody agreed? Right. Fantastic. And also to note that item 3C, which is Highfield Farm, West Perry, I'd like it, to make a decision that we do not consider the application 3C as the applicant has withdrawn the application. Are we all in agreement that we will not determine this particular application? 3C, which is Highfield Farm, West Perry. On the news. Yeah. Okay. We will move on to item 3A, which is Tilbrook Mill Kennels. And I'll invite our planning officer to present that to us.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening to everyone. The application relates to Tilbrook Mill Kennels and the High Street, Tilbrook. The proposal involves redevelopment and change of use of site from boarding kennels to residential Class C3, comprising of the erection of 5 dwelling houses, provision of modified vehicle access, landscaping, and ancillary development. The application has been brought to the Development Management Committee for consideration due to officer recommendation being contrary to the Parish Council's recommendation. The application site lies to the west of the small settlement of Tilbrook at a distance of approximately 900 meters and approximately 3.5 kilometers from a key service center of Kimbolton. The location of the site is therefore in the open countryside. The application site comprises a series of buildings formerly used as a dog boarding kennels, which ceased in October 2020. The existing buildings are concentrated in the front half of the site. And if you can see the next slide going down. Yeah. On the next, the existing buildings are concentrated on the front half of the site with only one kennel block extending into the rear half, almost to the rear boundary of the site. You can see that's the building there. The next slide shows the location of the site. And also we got the area photos we've just seen. From there, we have additional slides here, which shows the photographs of the site. And yeah, the photograph of the site, the photographs also show the form of the existing buildings and the R buildings, which is next. Yeah, this is the R building to Mill, Tilbrook Mill. And it's a garage, it's a converted garage. Yeah. The site does not lie within or adjacent to the conservation area. The nearest heritage asset is the White Horse Public House, which is to the west of the site. It's about 800 meters to that. We haven't got a photograph of White Horse to show you. The dwellings will be open market housing and will comprise 1 3-bed, 3 4-bed houses, and 1 5-bed. The dwellings will result in approximately 103 square meters increase in floor space, which equates to 13.3% increase when compared with the existing buildings. Furthermore, the proposal will result in 785 square meters increase in hard standing area. So you can see the hard standing, which is in colored block paved. Within the center, on the center of the site. Each dwelling will have eaves and ridge heights of approximately 2.6 meters and 6.4 respectively. And if you were to compare that to the existing building has a ridge height of approximately 4.1 meters. So the resultant, the replacement buildings will be 6.4, an increase in height of 2.3 meters. The next slide shows the layout of the development proposed. That's the thing. Yeah. Shows the development proposed. And you can see, as you can see on the outline of the existing buildings, it's been also been edged. It's the red edge is being superimposed on this plan. It's quite faint and possibly difficult to see, but you can see the buildings are at the frontage of the site, and the new dwellings, plot 3 and 4, are quite close to the edge of the boundary. To be precise, plot 4 is about 2.95 meters to the edge of the boundary, which is the narrowest point, and plot 4 it's about 3 meters. I've got a slide which shows that on the towards the end. Yeah. The next slides also show the floor and elevation plans of the proposed dwellings. So you can see these are the elevations of the 1.5 story buildings, and the floor plans there as well. With regard to consultation, Tilbrook Parish Council sent a representation in saying they support the proposal and has indicated that the proposal is an appropriate development. The council's urban design officer has raised an objection on grounds of unsustainable location and the site being removed from the settlement with no designated footpath, cycle provision that will connect the site to services. You would have seen some of the photographs there, which was taken from the site. And it shows a view from the west side, and you can see that there are no footpaths or no even street lights on there. It's on the photographs. So basically what the urban design officer says that this will make the connection to service and facilities difficult for the future occupiers, and they will rely solely on a private car ownership to access service and facilities. The officer has gone further and indicated that the layout of the development is unacceptable, resulting in cramped arrangement with limited opportunities for structural landscaping along the edge of plots 3 and 4. I think we've seen the layout for plots 3 and 4 and the proximity of the buildings to the edge of the boundary, which will limit the structural landscaping, which will provide some sort of transition into the open countryside on the rear of the site. The urban design officer has gone ahead and recommends refusal as the scheme is considered contrary to local plan policy LP 11, LP 12, parts A and B, and LP 16 and LP 17, and the placemaking principles set out in chapter 3 of the HDC Design Guide 2017. The next slide relates to dwellings on plot 3 and 4 relative to their respective band. We've seen that, yeah. As you can see, plot 4 will be cited, initially said the plot 4 will be cited 2.95, whilst plot 3 will be 3.7 on the band. So by proximity, this will limit the provision of adequate structural landscape. I'm repeating myself here, but I think it's a point which is important. The county highways have raised no objection, but raised concern about the location of the site. They've indicated the site is unsustainable with no footpath and no street lighting on the south side of the B645, which has a national speed limit of 60 miles an hour. This is clearly depicted on the slides, which we've seen already. The main issues are the principle of development and the impact of the development, the character and appearance of the area. With regard to the principle, the report has considered the objectives of policy LP2. Policy LP2 deals with strategy of development and deals with where location of development should be closer to settlement or will be in key service areas where the facilities and services are available. And policy LP 16 deals with sustainable travel. Policy LP 10 deals with countryside, and policy LP 33 rural buildings. Whilst policy LP 33 provides an opportunity for conversion or replacement buildings in the countryside, it is subject to meeting all of the criteria identified in the policy. Overall, the site is detached from the nearest settlement, and future residents will be reliant on the private car to access local facilities and services. This leads to conflict with policies LP2 and LP16, and this weighs negatively in the planning balance, as this will lead to residential development in an unsustainable location. The proposal would accord with Part A of policy LP10. However, it fails Part B of policy LP10. In terms of policy LP33, it is officers' view that the proposal would not lead to a clear and substantial enhancement of the site and immediate setting. This is a very high bar set by policy LP33. It requires development in the open countryside if you were to be either a conversion or replacement building to have clear and substantial enhancement of the site and immediate setting. The proposal is also contrary to the provisions of the National Planning Policy Framework 2021, particularly paragraph 79 and 80, which seek to concentrate additional housing within settlements and avoid new isolated dwellings in the countryside. It's also contrary to paragraphs 192, 104, and 105, which aim to promote safe, accessible, and healthy communities. It is therefore considered that the principle of the proposal is not supported by outlined policies, outlined local and national policies. With regard to the design and impact on the character and appearance, the proposal would not respond positively to the context within the surrounding built form. It would not contribute positively to the area's character and identity. The development would alter or change the character of the area due to the urbanization of the site, projecting back into the countryside. As you saw it from the slide, you could see the two buildings, plot 3 and 4, going that far deep into the plot and not giving enough space for structural landscaping, which would therefore alter the character and would impact on the transition of the site into the open countryside at the rear. Furthermore, the proposed one will, by virtue of size, design, scale, and layout, introduce an overly domesticated appearance of the site, together with domestic paraphernalia, car parking, cycle sheds, bin storage, fences, and hard standing areas, which would adversely impact on existing agricultural and rural landscape character of the location. The proposal is therefore contrary to policies LP 10, 11, 12, and 33 of the local plan to 2036, and the aims of paragraph 174B of the national planning policy. Carefully weighing up all the material considerations, it is concluded that the clear conflict with the development plan policies are not outweighed by the benefits of the development. There are no overriding material considerations that indicate that permission should be granted in this instance. Therefore, it is recommended that the application be refused for the reasons as stated in section 8 of the report. And I've got a summary of the reasons for refusal. I'm not going to read that, but it's just a summary of that because it will take too long. With regard to late representations, we have received additional information from Tilbrook Parish Council, which explains and expands on the reasons for recommending approval of the scheme. This was a matter which, when I was writing the report, got this representation from the Parish Council, and I wrote to them, asking them to give me planning reasons, which I could incorporate in the report. Their response came back quite late, and therefore it had to come in the late papers, late here. The officer report covers the issues raised in the report, and therefore the recommendation remains unchanged and one of a refusal as stated in section 8 of the report. The applicant's agent has also submitted further information, a rebuttal statement, which counters on the officer report. The statement seeks to provide an alternative point of view in light of the recommendation tabled at section 8 of the report. The additional information is included in the late paper. Or the officer report covers the main issues in the report, and therefore the recommendation remains unchanged and one for refusal as stated in section 8. That concludes my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. For this particular item, we have one speaker. We have Adriana Aston, who is the agent for this particular application.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Good evening. I'm the agent for this application. During the course of the application, there have been numerous attempts to engage with the council. Unfortunately, we've been unable to get a meaningful response from either of the case officers, and as a result are faced with a refusal recommendation. The applicant had hoped for some discussion of the proposal would be deemed reasonable, as the pre-application advice service was not available at the time of submission, and the application continued to run 5 months beyond the determination date. When the kennel business on the site was no longer viable, the specialist nature of the buildings limited their reuse, and therefore the redevelopment route was taken. The proposed scheme will dramatically improve upon the overall appearance of the site and contribute to its surroundings. The scheme would appear more agricultural in appearance than the existing kennels, with black timber boarding and red clay tiled roofs. Any lighting would be mitigated by curtains with external lights by front doors facing to the courtyard rather than an open countryside. This is in stark contrast to the lighting required by the kennel buildings, combined with the floodlights for the surrounding area, which was kept on late into the evening to facilitate the kennel's use. The Parish Council were in support of development and reiterated their support prior to this meeting. They believe the proposal offers a suitable reuse of the site, which might otherwise fall into disrepair. The statement by Progress Planning sent by the applicant to the committee counters the reasons for refusal in detail. This is of particular importance as a number of conclusions are not reflective of the actualities of the proposal. For example, the distance to Tilbrook, which has been used as grounds for stating the site is an unsustainable location, an undue appreciation of the architectural merits of the buildings in situ, and comments upon the proposed design itself. It is possible to reach the village of Tilbrook on foot via Wide Verge. Apart from the White Horse public house, there are no other facilities in the village. It is acknowledged the location would require residents to access facilities via a vehicle. However, this situation also applies to the residents of Tilbrook itself. The site is actually closer to Tilbrook than the Tilbrook Mill Farm development, which is 1.38 kilometres from the edge of the village. That development is 699 metres further from the village than the application site, and was approved without objection on the sustainability of its location. The proposal will deliver 5 high-quality family homes on previously developed land. Furthermore, it will result in fewer vehicular movements associated with the site. It is strongly believed that the whole scheme will enhance rather than detract from the appearance of the countryside. It will deliver a scheme fully in accordance with the development plan, and particularly in policy LP33, which actively encourages the redevelopment of built form in the countryside where defined criteria met, which is very much the case in this instance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do you have any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so thank you very much, Ms. Aston, for speaking to us. We will move on, and are there any questions of clarification for our planning officer? Councillor Sanderson.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for your report and presentation. 5.3 highways. There's a paragraph in here that says this should be mitigated with conditions, or the effect of the proposed development upon the public highway should be mitigated with conditions. if the planning authority is minded approving this proposal, but do they actually explain what those mitigations should be? And secondly, just a question for my own benefit. You refer to page 15 of the DAS. Could you just clarify what DAS means? I wasn't quite sure about that. Thank you.
Sorry. The DAS means design and asset statement. And I think what is referring, the highway officer is referring to in terms of if the council is minded approving the design, is looking at the highway issues, the access, is it adequate? Parking, is it sufficient? Turning within the site, is it sufficient? And he said, yes, it was. So if we were minded to approve, his advice is to impose conditions relating to that. Yeah, visibility achievable, yes. So he was also happy with the visibility of the site.
Are there any other questions or clarification? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
No, it is. I wanted to ask a little bit more about the relationship between this application and the design guide, the Huntingdonshire Design Guide. Are there specific parts of the design guide that you think that this contradicts, or can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Of my report. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. Because urban design need reference to it. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, what it is with the, we've looked at our council's design guide and related that to policy, because the design guides normally is a supplementary planning guidance. It fits into the policy, and the policy is quite clear. It's policy LP 33, and it talks about a clear and substantial enhancement to the setting, which we feel like it's in conflict with the design guide. The design guide fits into the policy, and the policy is the most important one. And it does contrary to the design guide in that instance. Yeah, which part? Let me see. It's IL2. I don't have the design guide here. You have it here. Yeah, he mentioned that at the bottom there. Scheme is going to yeah, chapter 3 of the ADC design guide. I haven't got the design guide with me here. I haven't got it. I'm sorry, I haven't got the design guide, but he's made urban design advice was it conflicts with chapter 3 of the design guide. I can have a look at it, try and see if I can.
Chair, if I could just through you. So the comments regarding design, the design guide is chapter 3, but the relevant local plan policies are policy LP 11 and LP 12. So the design guide provides more detail in relation to the policies LP 11 and 12.
Yeah, the design guide refers to the 2017 design guide it says a proposal should also have regard to relevant advice or guidance that promotes high quality designs, details the quality of character of the area, or describes how the area should develop in the future. So basically, the issue is about the quality of the design submitted in this application. And it's been assessed by the urban design, compared that against policy LP 11 and 12. And his view is that the design is not unacceptable and doesn't meet the high quality required by the SPD.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, just a couple of questions. Can you confirm that the HDC's refuse vehicles can turn round on the actual site along with a fire engine? And then under 5.4, the HDC urban design team have stated that residents would be solely reliant on a private car for ownership to get to Kimbolton or wherever to do shopping. Well, that's not quite true to say, because there is the Ting bus service that operates within Kimbolton and the west of the county. So they would have an alternative means of transport to get from that property into Kimbolton or into St Neots or to Hinchingbrook Hospital or to the train station. So it's just not quite true to say they're the urban design team. So I just want that clarified, please.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Noted your point regarding the Ting bus service, and obviously we do have regard to that, but we're also equally mindful that demand responsive transport is not in itself in perpetuity. Obviously, bus strategies are themselves are in a state of flux at the moment and need to be considered. So with that in mind, when we're thinking about new housing, which will be in perpetuity, it's about what we know to be there now and will be there in the future. And for now, Ting is not a service that we can say will be there and guaranteed to be there in the future.
Are there any other questions of clarifications for our planner? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Some of your report talks about the assessment of the footprint of the buildings and a 13% increase in the footprint. And LP 33 suggests that the developments will be supported where there is a modest, and that's the word they use, modest increase in size. Is there some case law that that has defined what modest might mean, or is that a completely, that's just our judgment of what we think modest might mean?
Normally, modest increase tend to be, for instance, if you're looking for conversion of an existing building and you want a small sort of extension to like a storage area or something to add to it, that's a modest increase. When it comes to replacement dwellings, although we say modest increase depending on what is there, but this one we've taken into account the number, the existing building, the location of it, and the depth of the plot, and they're developing well into the plot, and that is significantly different than what is there. So in terms of policy LP 33, LP 33 talks about modest, but 13.3% increase is not modest at all when you compare the footprint of the buildings. It's not, no, I didn't think it was the footprint of the buildings. It's the floor space of the buildings, which is 13.3% increase, because they've got 1.5 stories. So if you look at the floor space of the building, you're looking at the existing buildings are only single stories. But when you build in along the first floor, then that increases that. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification? Councillor Gorson.
Thank you, Chair. On this one, as we've noticed with a few others, the UU undertaking hasn't been given. Do we actually does the applicant have a full list of what is required? And so is it their omission, or is it that we've not asked? That was the question.
Yeah, the you referring to is the contribution towards willed beings. And everyone knows if you put in an application in or to the council, it's on the website, it's clearly identified that you need to do that. So it's nothing new. It's not like we've just hiding it from applicants or anything. It's there on the website. And admin is also quite, they tell people when they submit an application. So I don't know why the applicant didn't provide this.
Yeah, I understand it can be conditioned, but I've noticed a few applications coming forward without certain documents. That was all I was asking. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as a point of clarification, if we know an application is going to be refused for other matters, it would not be reasonable for us to invite additional information. So therefore, most will know it is on our website that a UU is required, and they will submit it. They'll put it in at the time of submission. Not all will. If we know an application is moving towards a positive outcome, we'll invite a UU to be submitted. But for the reasons set out in the report and the recommendation tonight, in the knowledge that the officer recommendation is one of refusal, we would not seek a UU. If the panel is minded to support this, subject to appropriate conditions, then before any decision is issued, it would be expected that a UU would be submitted to the council.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I think Councillor Gardner asked some other questions that I'm interested in as well about the bin lorry being able to turn about in the fire truck access.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yeah, paragraph 5.3 of the report, highways said that visibility displays of 2.4 and 215 meters are achievable, and there's a sufficient area for refuse, freighters, and emergency vehicles to turn. So they've looked at it and they're quite happy that vehicles will be able to turn.
Councillor Gorson.
Sorry, coming back on that very same one, because on 5.4 HDC urban design, they're saying that the collection point will be in the centre of the site, and the vehicle tracking for the plans has been submitted, which is incorrect to the actual tracking of the vehicle. So does that read that, albeit the highways are happy with this vehicle display, but the tracked vehicle could not go around and collect on the site? So that's page 120 of their pack.
Yes, Councillor, yes, that appears to be urban design checking things which appears to be going beyond. They're looking at the layout of the development and going beyond, talking about refuse tracking, turning around. However, we will rely on the county councils view on that. If they are happy with a refuse being able to track, being able to turn and being adequate, then we will go with what they're saying. Have I answered your question, or you think?
I think we're at two odds. Highways are just talking about the highway splay and the tracking in and out of sight. This is actually the urban design saying about where the centre will be for the bin collection will be inside the site, and it's saying that the tracking that they've delivered, they've given the tracking for a smaller vehicle than ours, and that is, as I say, halfway down the page of page 120. So it is considerably shorter than they've supplied on their tracking detail.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just add, you're correct. That is a particular issue. I think the county highways are viewing it from their point of view in relation to access to the site. And in their view, there is the capability of being able to turn a vehicle round and exit in a forward gear. The actual tracking associated with the application doesn't track the size of vehicle that we're proposing from our refuge collection. So that is a particular issue associated with the application. Thank you, Chair. Are there any other questions of clarification for our planning officer? In that case, we will move on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion on this particular application? Councillor Corney, thank you.
And we're off. Somebody's got, haven't they? Yeah, I've sort of sat here on the panel, and as a member before I was on the panel, sort of come and spoke in favour of some applications that have been refused in open countryside. So it's a difficult one because you know, in some aspects I think, you know, I've always said that, you know, we need to look at that, but on this one I think it's right. I think this is I think the officer's got this one, you know, sort of nailed on really. I think the scale, everything, you know, I completely agree. And we've heard about the UU form, and I find it's such a trivial thing, but of all the information that has to be put together for an application, a bin UU form is the simplest one to do, and I just find it sort of bizarre that they don't come in as much. I think Councillor Golson, his comment, I think, you know, we are seeing that a lot, which is, I don't really get that, but I'm happy to go with the officer. You know, I probably should hold back because nobody else has spoken yet, but as and when if you're looking for a recommendation, I'll happily talk to you then. Thank you.
Councillor Wakeford.
Seventh time lucky. Thank you. I take a similar view to Councillor Corney. I think this one is complex and it's perhaps more finely balanced than some we look at. But I think on balance, despite the technical arguments one can have that are set out in the report around the definition of being isolated, for example, I think in the round, the purpose of our local plan policies, as well as the relevant national planning policy framework referenced in 8.1 as a primary reason for refusal, do explain essentially because it is in an appropriate location, it is accessible only with vehicles, and as we have been reminded, that does not only mean private car potentially, but the absence of active travel connections, footpath connections, safe connection to the village is rightly a concern in our policies. So I agree it is a difficult one, but I'll be voting with Councillor Corney this evening.
Councillor Mockball.
Oh, mine worked straight away. I'd just like to say thank you to Richard for such a great report and presentation. I'm also minded to refuse based on mainly the amenity, the residential amenity, the boundary between the house and the countryside. If you look at the two properties that are on the rear, the two properties that are on the rear of the plot, they're just too close to the countryside, as well as all the other points that Councillor Corney has raised, as well as Wakeford. But yeah, I am also minded to refuse. Thank you.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I find myself having come to a different conclusion than some of my colleagues who have spoken so far. When I think of putting all of the different material planning reasons into a balance, we have, the need for more housing, a presumption in favor of development, the use of a brownfield site, a design that reflects a kennel building, and then set against that the bin provision, which I think we can secure with a condition. The unsustainable location, there is Ting, and I think if there was a scheduled bus, that would also be unpredictable in the future. If there was a train, that could be unpredictable in the future. So to say that Ting itself and demand responsive transport is unpredictable is no different than either of those. And in terms of the floor space, a 13% increase, I think because of the existing development of the site, I do find that to be modest and to suit LP 33. I think, so this really does come down to LP 33, and that says the proposal for a replacement of a building in the countryside will be supported where there is a clear and substantial enhancement of the immediate setting. Well, if I go to the setting now and I look at the designs that are proposed, I think that is a clear and substantial enhancement to that brownfield site. That's how I've weighed up the different material planning considerations, but it sounds like I may have come to a different conclusion than my colleagues.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the officers have got this right. I feel there's, there is the Combs County Council archaeological survey that's needed. Highways have made a few comments and put a few suspects there. The main thing is the urban design team, HDC's own team. And if you read through that, it pretty much sums up why this shouldn't go ahead. I don't think any of us would have anything against this site being developed in some way, but this is not it. This is cramped, as our urban design team have said, it's cramped. It is building in the open countryside. If you study our policies, you will see that it is exactly that. It's building in the open countryside. I think if the footprint had been kept to pretty much to what it originally is, they could make a better design of this area. It's just too much and too far out away from the village. So yeah, I shall be going along with the officers. And as I say, I don't think anybody would disagree that we could do something there or something could be done on that site, but this is definitely not it anyway. Thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Really, the rules are somewhat different. As Councillor Butler said, they're building in the open countryside. different policies will apply. I was generally not sure which way I would vote on this before the meeting. I did look at the site beforehand, and I agree with Councillor Butler. I think it's too cramped. I think the 13.3% increase that Richard outlined in his report, increase in the footprint of the site, makes this, I think, unacceptable on balance, and given the objections from our urban design team and the information that the County Council archaeological team still don't have, I'll be supporting the recommendation of refusal. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I've come to a very similar conclusion to Councillor Davenport-Ray, because I just do not think that we can, if we leave the site, it's going to become a total eyesore within that part of the district. Something does need to be done to make the development work, and I do think this particular development works on that site. The parish council has got no objection to the development. All properties within Tilbrook have got no footpaths. If you go down the main street in Tilbrook, there is no footpath. So we're not really, the same applies. Tilbrook Parish Council has been successful recently from Cambridgeshire Highways in getting a cycle route from Kimbolton to Tilbrook. So that will assist the situation. So that will get you right to the edge of Tilbrook, which is not there now. I know it's a future development, but it is coming. So on balance, I think I'm more likely to go along the route of approval, and I'm happy to propose that, Chair.
Is there anyone else? Councillor Golson.
Thank you, Chair. Like a number of colleagues, I'm looking at this and seeing it seems to be an overdevelopment of the site in line with safety concerns from highways. Also, our own urban design team have got concerns over the development. I think, as Councillor Butler said, it needs something doing, and it is an area that could do with something doing to it, but this, to my mind, is overdevelopment. And I don't know if Councillor Corney, he said Conboy there, Corney proposed it. I'm prepared to second proposal of of refusal in line with the officer's decision.
Are there any other councillors that have not contributed to this discussion that wish to speak? No, in that case, I have a proposal to refuse from Councillor Corney, and that's been seconded by Councillor Golson. All those in favour of refusal for this particular application, please can you raise your hand? It was
Councillor Gardner, but I don't think you requested a seconder.
so I had a proposal from Councillor Corney, Councillor Wakeford, Councillor Mockball, Councillor Davenport-Ray, Councillor Butler, Councillor Sanderson didn't do a second or propose. Councillor Gardner proposed and Councillor Golson seconded. So I didn't have a seconder for that particular proposal.
Sorry, I think Councillor Gardner proposed that we approve. I don't think anybody.
It didn't get seconded.
Okay, sorry. I
proposal.
don't think you asked, which I thought perhaps was the reason why it wasn't seconded, but that may not be the case.
No. So we will go back to that. So Councillor Corney proposed refusal, and Councillor Golson seconded that particular refusal. All those for refusal of this application.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
And all those against?
1, 2.
And any abstentions? Therefore, that is carried and that has been refused. We will move on to item 3B on the agenda, which is 26 to 28 the Broadway, St Ives. In your packs, that is page 29 to 66. And our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson, will present that to us.
Sorry? All right, I'll turn it up.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. So the site is 26 to 28 the Broadway, St Ives. The proposal is for the demolition of 2 outbuildings and the erection of 8 flats with parking. This application is referred to committee because the officer recommendation is contrary to the Town Council recommendation of approval. St Ives Town Council recommends approval, supports the application as the development will greatly improve the presently unattractive street scene into the curtilage from West Street, as well as providing much needed small unit accommodation for the people in need of starter homes. Members should note there's an extensive update report for this item. A letter from Brown & Co was received, which attempted to address the reasons for refusal. As outlined in the update report, the recommended reasons for refusal 1 to 4 still stand. Following confirmation from the applicant that Brown & Co acting on behalf of the applicant, reason 5, which is in relation to a UU about bins, is withdrawn. So in front of you, you can see the site outlined in black, shading. The application site comprises approximately 700 square meters of land, which extends from the rear of 2628 Broadway to the street frontage at West Street in St Ives Town Centre. The site is mainly hardstanding, with a section of grass and the outbuildings within the site, which Kirch is listed in association with the adjoining Grade 2 listed building 2628 Broadway. The site is located within St Ives Conservation Area and is adjacent to several Grade 2 listed buildings along the frontage of Broadway. There's also Grade 2 listed buildings nearby at West Street and the Waits, and you can see the listed buildings are in pink on the plan in front of you. The site is located largely within flood zone 3A, with a small section in flood zone 2, according to the Huntingdonshire Strategic Flood Risk Assessment 2017. You can see that's in green on the screen in front of you. So this is an aerial image of the site. So to the bottom of the screen is the Broadway, and to the top is West Street. If I just wiggle the mouse, oh, where's it gone? So where my mouse is now is the Grade 2 listed building, and you can see the site stretches out to the rear, and you've got hard stand, which is currently used for car parking. So the proposal, the application seeks approval for the demolition of 2 outbuildings and the erection of 8 flats. The proposal is to construct a terrace of buildings, units 1 to 8, of varying detailed design and heights, 2-story and 3-story elements, in a linear arrangement along the line of the plots. The proposal comprises 5 1-bedroom flats and 3 2-bedroom flats, parking on the ground floor and undercroft. Units 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 8 are duplexes, ground floor lounge and kitchen areas, and first floor bedrooms and bathrooms. Unit 6 is solely on the first floor, and Unit 7 is solely on the second floor. I'll make that clear as we go through the plans. So members should note there's been a previous approval on the site. Planning permission and listed building consent was granted for a similar development in 2005. Members should note that these approvals have lapsed. It should also be noted that since those approvals, there's been the adoption of the St Ives Conservation Area Character Assessment 2007, the MPPF, which was first published in 2012, the current local plan, which was adopted in 2019. And in addition to this, the councils and the Environment Agency flood mappings have also been updated since 2005. So we can give limited weight to these approvals. One, due to the time that's lapsed, and the fact that we're now determining these against a significantly different policy position to that which was in place at the time of the 2005 approval. So I'll just run through. So these are the existing plans. They are the same plans that were approved in the 2005 application. They're all on one plan and have been photocopied, so it's not easy to get them clear on the screen. So just note that as we go along. I'll point out as much as I can. So this is the proposed elevations. So the top one will be facing towards Mews Cottage, which I will refer to later on. And the bottom one is facing north towards the backs of properties. These are the floor plans. So you've got units 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 8 duplexes. So they've got ground floor lounge kitchen areas, and they've got first floor bedrooms and bathrooms. This is due to flood risk. To keep the sleeping accommodation above ground floor level. You've got unit 6, which is solely on the first floor, and unit 7, which is solely on the second floor. I should just note that also there is the site plan on the ground floor plan. So you can see there's parking, Undercroft car parking. Can I leave this? So behind, if you could, yeah, sorry. So yeah, great, thank you. So now we've moved the images out of the way. So on the bottom right-hand side, you can see the access to the site. You've got bins against the nearest residential property, and then you've also got a barrier to obviously stop people just entering the site. Should also note over where my mouse is now, the cycle parking in the Undercroft. These are some more plans. This is just showing the wall, some more of the context, the existing wall before you saw it without the wall. And you can kind of see the 2-story elements and the 3-story. So this is a photo of the front of the site. This is a photo of the site from access towards the host listed building. This is a photo from the adjacent site with first floor window arrangement of Coach Mews Cottage and also the historic wall. So the officer recommendation is refusal for the following reasons. Reason 1, the proposed development of 8 flats would fail the sequential test for flooding, contrary to local and national policy. The proposed development is therefore unacceptable in principle, as it would place people and property at unwarranted risk of flooding. There's an extensive section on the flood risk in the report. So I've just done a quick summary of what a sequential test is. So the site is largely located in flood zone 3A, with a small section in flood zone 2. National and local planning policy states development should not be allocated or permitted if there are reasonable available sites appropriate for the proposed development areas with a lower risk of flooding. That the aim of the sequential test is to steer new development to areas with the lowest risk of flooding from any source. Sequential approach should be used in areas known to be at risk now or in the future from any form of flooding. The sequential test compares the site you're proposing to develop with other available sites to find out which has the lowest flood risk. The application would fail the sequential test for flooding, contrary to MPPF and the local plan policies. Reason 2, which is to do with the heritage impact, the scale and massing of proposed building would cause harm to the setting and significance of the grade 2 listed building, 26 to 28 Broadway, and cause harm to the character and appearance of the St Ives Conservation Area. So this is just some plan. Oh, that's right. It's just come up on the screen. So there are the plans in front of you, which you've already seen, with some photos and also just the aerial image, just so you can see. So the conservation team and the urban design team will consult as part of the application and have objected to the proposal. Scale of the terrace is not in keeping with the area and introduces structures of excessive height, which are considered to represent an overdevelopment, which would harm the setting of the listed building and the character of the conservation area. Reason 3, which is residential amenity impacts. So there's a lot here to wrap up. So the proposed development would have a significant adverse impact on the amenity standards of Coach Mews Cottage due to overshadowing, overbearing impacts, and the predicted noise disturbance, obtrusive light, loss of privacy and odour associated with the proposed pedestrian and vehicular movements, and the proximity to the vehicle barrier and bin store enclosure. In addition, the proposed development would require the use of obscure glazing to protect the privacy standards of neighbours, but this would create unacceptable levels of natural light and outlook to habitable rooms for future occupiers, flats 2, 5, 6 and 7. The proposal would therefore fail to provide a high standard of amenity for all users and occupiers of the proposed development and would fail to maintain an acceptable standard of amenity for users and occupiers of neighbouring buildings. So I've just got a few plans in front of you here. So for context, where the red arrows are facing, that is facing towards Coach Mews Cottage. So it's literally where those red arrows are. You can see the bin store. Can you see my mouse? For some reason it seems to be disappearing. But the furthest right red arrow is where the bin store is, and also the vehicle barrier. You can obviously see the cars turning in and out adjacent to this property. And then on the elevations at the top, you can see the amount of windows proposed and the height and bulk of the building. And then top left, you can see a 25-degree test, which is referred to in the officer report. The bottom left is a photo, and you can see the ground floor windows and also the first floor window for Coach Mews Cottage. So reason 4, which is in relation to bins and bikes. So proposed development fails to successfully integrate the functional needs of future occupiers due to the unsuitable and unsecure cycle storage proposed and the visual prominence and amenity impact Coach Mews Cottage associated with the proposed bin storage. So on the plan in front, you can see again, just highlighted in red. So bottom right is the bin store. And the top left is a cycle parking located very closely to a car parking space and would be easy to access as well. Reason 5, which was in relation to a bin UU, has now been withdrawn from the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. For this particular application, we have one speaker. We have the agent, who is Lydia Pravani.
Hello there, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you and see you. So welcome, and you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Good evening, members. The proposed development is for 7 one-bedroom and 1 two-bedroom open market flats on a previously developed site at 26 to 28 the Broadway, St Ives. Mr David Pitts from Pitts Architects, whose design scheme, is also here to answer any questions about the proposal. And it's important to note the site is in a highly sustainable location in St Ives, and paragraph 86 of the National Planning Policy Framework 2021 sets out planning decisions should promote the long-term vitality of towns by allowing them to grow through a mix of uses, including housing. A flood risk assessment accompanies the planning application and sets out the sequential test and exception test. The site is located in St Ives Conservation Area, and 26 to 28 the Broadway are grade 2 listed buildings in terms of the curtilage aspect. The site is in a sustainable location with access to services and facilities via walking in the heart of St Ives. The views of the site from West Street currently detract from the conservation area, and redevelopment of the site would lead to enhancement to the conservation area and provide a regeneration opportunity. Therefore, in the case of this specific development proposal, the benefits cannot be achieved by building new houses elsewhere in areas with lower probability of flooding, and therefore the sequential test has been satisfied. The flood risk assessment also sets out the exception test is met, with the Environment Agency raising no objection on flood risk grounds. With regards to the impact on the setting of the significance of 26 to 28 the Broadway and character and appearance of St Ives Conservation Area, a sympathetic design has been created, and it is considered will protect and enhance the significance and historic form of the heritage assets. Fundamentally, the statutory duty as set out in the Planning, List of Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990 under Section 66 and Section 72 has not changed and was considered under planning application in 2005 for the erection of the 8 flats and also the listed building consent. In terms of the immediate impact on 3 Coach Mews, this predates the demolition of the 3 tons public house, which was present on the site. And it's important to note the flats were previously approved with no objections relating to the proximity of number 3 Coach Mews. Drawing number 1023.2 revision I shows changes to the cycle and bin storage and does not cause harm to the amenity of Coach Mews. It's important to note the bins have been moved and they are now in a covered area, and as set out, the unilateral undertaking aspects being addressed. We're grateful for St Ives Town Council's support, and in conclusion, it's considered the proposal accords with the Huntingdonshire Local Plan to 2036 and National Planning Policy Framework 2021. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for our speaker, Councillor Davenport-Ray?
Thank you for coming to speak with us this evening. In the report that the officer has prepared for us, he's very helpfully included in 7.21 the example of a similar application that was appealed and refused on appeal. Having read that, I wonder if what your reflection is on how that relates to the current application before us.
Sorry, did I hear correctly? That was for myself too.
Yes. Having read the information the officer has provided to us about a similar application that was appealed and refused on appeal, how do you assess that against the application that you provided that's in front of us this evening?
So my involvement with this application, I've been brought on board, and in terms of the flooding aspect, it's considered that this is quite a unique proposal with new dwellings, and there is the previous history there in terms of, obviously I've said about the listed building and the heritage assets consideration, but it's felt that there aren't any reasonably available sites. I am aware of that that appeal that you're referencing.
Are there any other questions for our speaker or for the applicant who's also here? Councillor Slade.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask the architect, Mr. Pitts, about the access to the site? So somebody mentioned that there is gated access, and also looking at the plans, is it possible for cars to pass along that road where the occupants are obviously going to be parking?
It's a single width access over the pavement with no curbs, and it is single lane. So if there's a car in the way, the other one will have to wait. I mean, that's as it is at the moment.
Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up question then? So where are you intending them to wait? So before the gate on the highway?
Well, they could pull into the site, and if somebody's parking, they will wait while they park. I don't see that's a particular problem. But we've lost 2 parking bays with an enclosed bin storage and enclosed bike store, which the drawings which were displayed were incorrect. They are not the latest drawings. And we're happy to move those to parking bays A and B to the northeast end from the southwest. So there would only be, just counting them, 5 parking bays. So there won't be a lot of traffic. And there's a public car park opposite.
So what you're saying, so I'm still a bit confused. So you're saying that's a single track road and cars
What it
can't
is at
pass,
the moment, yes.
but you're thinking that they can wait. I'm just confused where the car is going to wait to get access to their parking. Sorry, I might be.
Well, if somebody pulls in, they can park outside houses 1 and 2 if somebody's pulling into one of the other parking bays. But, you know, the traffic will be minimal. There'll only be 5 cars.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. You stated in your address that that the site had passed the sequential test, if I heard you right. Yet our officers said that it would fail the sequential test. Would you like to elaborate on that, please? Why you've come to that decision?
Yes, certainly. So in terms of this specific proposal, which is for 7 one-bedroom and 1 two-bedroom home and market flats, the sequential test in terms of looking at housing in areas of lower probability of flooding, it's considered this unique proposal in a sustainable location. It's considered that the views from West Street detract from the conservation area and that the redevelopment of the site would lead to an enhancement and provide a regeneration opportunity.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Some of the information before us shows the flats as affordable and uses the word affordable, but without a definition of how that might be achieved. And you mentioned open market. Can you just clarify what it is that's intended?
Yes, they are definitely for 7 one-bedroom and 1 two-bedroom open market flats. So it's not affordable as in the definition of affordable housing.
Are there any more questions? There are no more questions, so thank you very much for addressing us. As there are no more questions, we will move on to any questions or clarification for our planning officer. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, following on from the sequential test, I mean, you've heard what the speaker has said about that. Can I have your views on that sequential test, please?
Through you, Chair. So there's an extensive section in the officer report, I think kind of nearly 30 paragraphs, which outline the officer's assessment, starting with the correct legislation, policy, and then the process for assessing this. Obviously, there is a difference in opinion here. If I just find the correct paragraph, bear with me. So yeah, starting at 7.8 to 7.30 are the relevant paragraphs. In terms of the sequential test, they haven't put any sites forward, any alternative sites for assessment, which is the definition of sequential test, as kind of outlined in the previous slide. You're meant to assess your proposed site against other available sites in the district. They failed to do that. In terms of the sustainability and the comments made about the heritage impact, obviously there's another disagreement there. One of the reasons for refusal is the heritage impact. There's also another reason for refusal, which is the impact on neighbouring properties, which is, again, a disagreement with the applicant. Did you want me to expand?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I was on the sequential test as well. Councillor Butler's brought that up already. And in response, officers have drawn attention to the lengthy chunk in the report on that. I just wonder if I can come back briefly on the tackling of the additional correspondence set out in the late rep submission, the argument about the scope to consider this a redevelopment opportunity in a sustainable location that wouldn't, by definition, wouldn't be achieved by looking at other sites. Just wonder if you can unpack the summary response to that. Is the point that that argument doesn't fly because we don't see this as redevelopment in the desirable sense in view of the scale and massing and impacts on the conservation area, or is that argument misconceived in principle, regardless of whether or not we think the redevelopment opportunity meets that definition?
Through you, Chair. So yeah, in paragraph 7.20, we do state that it's recognised that development represents redevelopment opportunity in a highly sustainable location. However, it does not follow that sequential tests automatically pass on that basis. The submitted flood risk assessment does not provide justification for the functional requirements and objectives of the proposed development, which may trigger discussion and negotiation regarding the potential for a reduced geographical search area for the sequential test. Ultimately, insufficient justification has been submitted in terms of sequential tests, which officers would fail based on a district-wide search. Therefore, the proposed development is considered unacceptable as it would place people and property and an unwarranted risk of flooding contrary to local and national planning policy. Apologies to read out the whole paragraph, but I think this section is so important. You need to read it as a whole. You can't just isolate parts of it. I think it just goes back to the point as well that we disagree around the heritage and the impact on neighbouring properties, which is a key part here.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Forgive me, through you, Jed, just to say thank you, particularly helpful for spelling that out fully, and so you've confirmed that sort of stands unamended despite the response subsequently and the commentary in the late reps. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you, Lewis. I think this is a very well-written report. There's a lot of different elements going on, and you pulled them together well, especially 7.21, where you talk about a relevant recent appeals decision. I find it very helpful to have that context, and in future reports, I would encourage that as well. But so I'm going to ask you a similar question to what I asked the agent. What do you see as the similarities with that appeal decision and the differences? Similarities and differences with the application before us?
For you, Chair. So I'll start with that. Obviously, we assess every application on its own merits. So it's a case-by-case basis. The reason why we refer to this appeal decision is around the assessment of the sequential test element and how the inspector dismissed the appeal based on the fact they didn't do the sequential test and provide alternative sites, even though there was already development on the site, but that was an intensification. So it's similar in that case, but it's also a brownfield site. But I think the key part there is the inspector's assessment of the flood risk and where it's failed on the sequential test. But I think, yeah, the bottom line is we do assess every application on its own merits. This is just for reference. It's in the local area. It has a similar issue to one that we're discussing here tonight. Yeah, I think there's also another point, the fact that the appeal decision scheme also had a type of accommodation where there was no sleeping accommodation on the ground floor, but parking, which is similar to this case. So just because you provide mitigation doesn't mean you automatically pass the sequential test. That comes at a later part of the assessment.
Are there any other questions of clarification for our planning officer? If there are no more questions, we'll move on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion? Thank you, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Davenport Ray said this very thorough report. I thought that particularly the piece from paragraph 7.8, the flood risk was really clear. It obviously does pass the sequential test in one capacity, but it does fall down, as you said, on the need for looking at alternative sites. One of many reasons I think that this is not acceptable. So I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. Likewise, I think the report's made a complex flooding and legal position intelligible to us. I think it is makes a very robust argument, and obviously having reflected on the contribution that we've heard on behalf of the applicant and the material in our packs, I think this is sufficiently clear that unless I be getting in the way of colleagues contributing further, I'm happy to put a proposal on the table in favour of supporting the officer recommendation of rejection. I do that with a heavy heart because I'd like to be doing nothing more than supporting additional housing, even if it's not affordable, despite the claim on the application form to the contrary. But I don't see we can stack that up with the policy position in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor McAdam.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree and concur that this is a particularly good and well written and clear report. I do think that the very big deciding factor here is the flooding risk. We also we are being told time and again that global warming, climate change is not going to get any better. In fact, it's going to get worse. We have a lot of, we're constantly seeing extreme weather events. And even if we thought we could get away with it now, it's not going to happen, almost certainly not going to happen in the future. But looking at the heritage side of things with the grade 2 listed buildings around, I do think it's completely out of character with the street scene around there. I don't think it's an improvement. In fact, I think it actually clashes. Also, with respect to what was said about access, it just seems a very cramped, very narrow. It just doesn't seem right. It just, you know, I'm not happy with the street scene. So, yes, so I agree with the report, and I'm inclined to vote for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I'm in agreement with my colleagues so far, but actually I find the other elements of the report more compelling around the harm to the potential harm to the listed building, and that's the parent of what this building would become, and potential harm to the conservation area, but also the overlooking of Coach Mews next door and the potential loss of daylight. I think even regardless of the flooding elements, I think those two material planning considerations would be weighty enough for me to follow my colleague's lead on this.
Councillor Mockball.
Thank you, Chair. I've lived in St Ives all my life, so I've never seen that area flood, but I understand obviously it's in the flood risk area. But I don't agree with Councillor McAdam when he says that it affects the street scene, because there is development just a few 100 yards down on West Street. So, you know, I don't understand how that development was allowed to happen, but this one isn't. Because obviously I understand the sequential test hasn't been passed, but my main reason for refusal is the privacy for the, you know, the property next door, and the amenity for the current, you know, the proposed building. I don't think it's suitable, but I think something obviously should be done. If you've been there to the site, you would see it's just a car park and it hasn't been used and it's overgrown and it's an eyesore. So something does need to be done. I just don't think this is it. And I would also be minded to refuse. Thank you.
Councillor Jordan.
Keep on.
Yeah, I have to say that it was a very well written report, and again, congratulations and thank you, because it does help us when we get a report like this. It makes it easier to read and we can cross, if you like, reference things. I have to say, I have to agree with what my colleagues have said tonight about the flood risk. It's a difficult one because we're criticised if we don't take notice of it. We're criticised if we do take notice of it. But I agree, with global warming, things are not going to get better. And if there is this the flood risk, and the test wasn't done or passed, then I think that we should go with refusal. There are the other factors, the heritage of the buildings as well. But also then I agree with what was said before about the previous planning. You have a site there and it is unkempt and it doesn't look good. But this planning application, I don't think is the right application for that area. So with that in mind, I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Brayton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, narrow entrance, cars having to wait outside on West Street opposite the car park. Even though there is going to be only 5 cars moving, if one's coming out, that's going to cause mayhem, especially on a Saturday. So along with all the other comments that have been made, I'm minded to refuse this as well. Thank you.
Are there any other councillors that would like to contribute to this particular discussion? If not, I have a proposal to refuse from Councillor Wakeford. Is there anyone that will second that proposal? Councillor Mockball, thank you. All of those who are in favour to refuse this application, can you please raise your hand?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
So that is unanimous and that is refused. We will move on to our next item on the agenda, which is agricultural buildings in Godmanchester. And this will be presented to us by our planning officer, Andrea Doland, and you can find this in your packs on page 67 to 96.
Evening committee, thank you, Chair. This item relates to a full application for the change of use from hard standing storage area to container storage area of an agricultural building and land on Debden Farm Lodge, Godmanchester. The application is retrospective as the site is currently used by paying customers for storage within 55 sited blue shipping containers. The application has been brought to Development Management Committee as the planning officer's recommendation of refusal is contrary to that of Godmanchester Parish Council. Godmanchester Parish Council have recommended approval as the hard standing storage area has been operating as a container storage area for the last 2 years. The site is set back from the main road and is surrounded by planting. I'd like to bring to the attention of the committee the late representations by the applicant relating to a plan showing the entry onto the roundabout with the A1198, a plan showing the location of lighting on the site, and a letter suggesting that LP19 was not relevant as the business is existing and that the proposal will be classed as farm diversification. Officers have noted the amended plans and comments contained in Officers have noted the amended plans and comments. However, they contained insufficient technical detail as required by highways and insufficient technical detail on lighting on site and the impact on wildlife. Officers have noted the suggestion that this application be classed as farm diversification. However, this is not supported by sufficient information to determine the relationship between the proposed development and the operation of Debden Lodge Farm. Therefore, the officers were unable to assess the late representation, and the officer's recommendation remains as refusal. This slide shows the site location, which can be seen here marked with a yellow flag, approximately 1.5 miles south of Godmanchester and 1.6 miles west of Hilton, the closest built-up areas in the locality. The pink line to the south of the site is Bridleway number 102/2. The proposal primarily relates to the open countryside by virtue of its physical and visual detachment from the main built-up areas of Godmanchester and Hilton, and therefore considered to lie within the countryside. This slide shows the site in greater detail, which is made up of a number of agricultural buildings and dwelling. The area relating to the proposal is marked with black, and the dwelling can be seen to the west of the site marked with the greenhouse. The current land use in planning terms is grade 2 agricultural. This slide shows the site to the south of the picture. This slide shows the site to the south of this picture and the access road joining the roundabout with the A14 flyover with the A1198. This slide shows an historical aerial image of the site, which shows the containers to the north and south. However, further containers have been added since to the east and west of the central building. This slide shows the current position of the 55 blue containers on site. Each container is 6 meters in length, 2.4 meters in width, and 2.6 meters in height, and are viewed as permanent structures by virtue of their size and permanency. Together, the containers to the north of the site are 24 meters long by 2.6 meters in height. To the south, 48 meters long by 2.6 meters in height. To the east, 36 meters long by 2.6 meters in height, with other containers sited sporadically around the site. This slide shows the entrance to the site looking east towards Hilton, with the agricultural building to the right-hand side. The containers to the left of the picture are on the northern boundary of the site, with the entrance road behind. The containers to the centre of the picture are those bordering the east, and to the right of the picture, the containers can be seen under the canopy of the agricultural building. This slide shows the site looking west towards the Offords, with the agricultural building to the right. The containers to the left border the south of the site, and to the right of the picture, further containers can be seen under the canopy of the agricultural building. This slide shows the site looking to south towards Papworth and Gravely, with the agricultural building just off this picture to the left, to the right even. The containers to the right of the picture are those bordering, to the left of the picture are those bordering the east of the site. This slide shows the site looking to the east towards Hilton, with the agricultural building to the left, containers adjacent and under the canopy, containers to the right border the south. This slide shows the site looking north towards Godmanchester, and at the time of the officer visit, the canopy served as storage for both containers and bags of fertiliser. This slide shows the proximity of the containers to the trees and views into the countryside. And this slide shows laid hardcore material to the periphery of the site for the siting of the containers. Officers have recommended refusal of this application for the following reasons. Number one, principle of development. When assessing the principle of development, the following policies have been considered. LP10, the countryside, states that development in the countryside will be restricted to limited and specific opportunities as provided for by other policies in the plan. All development in the countryside must seek to use lower grade agricultural land in preference to land of higher agricultural value, avoid the irreversible loss of the best and most versatile agricultural land, grade 1 to 3A, and avoid grade 1 agricultural land unless there are exceptional circumstances. They should recognise the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside, and finally not give rise to noise, odour, obtrusive light or other impacts that would adversely affect the use and enjoyment of the countryside by others. This policy specifically reflects the importance of protecting the best and most versatile agricultural land, as well as recognising the rural character and landscape of Huntingdonshire's countryside. Development proposals should seek to minimise their potential impact and recognise the intrinsic character of the countryside through good design and careful location. Where development is proposed, high-quality design will be required. A proposal should not adversely affect the character and tranquility of the countryside and should ensure that it will not give rise to impacts that would reduce opportunities for others to use and enjoy the countryside, including for wildlife. In particular, a proposal should not create artificial light in an area with a potentially high impact on wildlife or an intrinsically dark landscape. This application fails to recognise the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside and gives rise to impacts that would reduce opportunities for others to use and enjoy the countryside, including wildlife. In considering LP19 in the application, the proposal has been assessed as a retrospective application for new business development. Information was submitted presenting the application as long established existing business, implying that the scheme might be considered as a farm diversification proposal. Officers would like to draw to the attention of the committee that there are no planning permissions in place to change the use of the land to storage use under Class B and therefore has not been assessed as such. A proposal for farm diversification may be supported where it is complementary and subsidiary to the ongoing agricultural operations of the farm business, and it's further considered that criteria A to E of policy LP19. Insufficient information has been presented to determine the relationship between the proposed development and the operation of Debden Lodge Farm. Therefore, it is not possible to properly assess the proposal as a farm diversification scheme. Finally, the proposal has been considered against Good Manchester Neighbourhood Plan, Policy GMC1, the importance of the countryside setting. Development in the Good Manchester Neighbourhood Plan area shall be focused within or adjoining the settlement boundary as identified in the plan. Development outside the settlement boundary is classified as being in the open countryside. Development in the open countryside will only be acceptable where it is a use which is appropriate to the open countryside and should seek to preserve and protect our best and most versatile agricultural land and land of local environmental value, including but not limited to Good Manchester Nature Reserve at Cow Lane, the east side and west side commons in Good Manchester and Ouse Valley. This proposal is outside the settlement boundary, therefore in terms of this policy, open countryside, and seeks to develop grade 2 agricultural land. Therefore, the reason that the principle of development is recommended refusal is that the development site lies in the open countryside, which would represent an encroachment of built development into the countryside outside of the built up area of any settlement. The proposal does not accord with any of the limited or specific opportunities for development in the countryside as set out within the policies of Huntingdonshire Local Plan, which restrict development in the countryside to protect the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. Furthermore, the proposed development would result in the loss of grade 2 agricultural land for which exceptional circumstances have not been demonstrated. The proposal would therefore be contrary to the requirements of LP2 and LP10 of Huntingdonshire Local Plan. The proposed development is contrary also to Good Manchester Neighbourhood Plan, Policy GMC1, the importance of the countryside due to its location outside the detailed settlement boundary. The proposal does not seek to preserve and protect the most versatile agricultural land. The second reason for refusal relates to the design, scale and massing, as the proposed development by virtue of its design, scale and massing would appear as a prominent and alien feature in the countryside, failing to respect the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside and failing to successfully integrate with the adjoining open landscape. The proposal would therefore be contrary to policies LP10, LP11, LP12 and LP19 of Huntingdonshire Local Plan. The third reason for refusal relates to insufficient information having been submitted to the local planning authority to demonstrate that the proposal would not result in harm to the residential immunity of the neighbours at the dwelling on the site, in particular around intensity of use and traffic and lighting. The proposal is therefore contrary to policy LP14 of Huntingdonshire's local plan. The fourth reason for refusal relates to insufficient information having been submitted to the local planning authority regarding the impact on the highways and users to enable the officers to assess the effect on the local highway network of the proposed development. The proposal therefore fails to comply with the requirements of policy LP17 of Huntingdonshire Local Plan and Section 9 of the National Planning Policy Framework 2021. And finally, the final reason for refusal relates to insufficient information having been submitted to demonstrate that the proposal would not result in harm to trees, hedgerows and hedges and would not result in harm to protected species or wildlife. The proposal is therefore contrary to policy LP30 and LP31 of Huntingdon's local plan, the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, the Habitats and Protected Species Regulations 2017, and the National Planning Policy Framework 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have two speakers for this particular application. First of all, we have our Town Councillor, Karen Pawley. Councillor Pawley, would you like to come and join us? You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee. You may have to press the button several times for it to work.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, members. Godmanchester Town Council has discussed this application twice and both times felt that we would like to seek to approve it. The business has been operating for a number of years with no reports of noticeable increase in traffic or highways incidents, other than the one motorcycle incident, which most likely is due to poor observation skills on the part of the car driver leaving the site. The site already operates with hard standing for storage purposes, and this application is to request the placement of containers on the existing hard standing. The site is not clearly visible from the road as it's surrounded by dense planting, and the containers could be removed at a later date if required. It is therefore not a permanent structure. The location is far enough outside of Godmanchester and Hilton so as not to affect either settlement. And whilst we note that it's grade 2 agricultural land, this particular plot is already being used as a hard standing storage and is not as a prime agricultural land. The location is sited next to excellent transport links, and the site and access is already set up for large agricultural machinery. Godmanchester Town Council is happy to support this diversification by the applicants, and perhaps we need to consider as a whole what is considered acceptable diversification by our farmers for fear of losing farmland generally within our communities.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pawley. Are there any questions for our speaker this evening? There are no questions, so thank you, Councillor Pawley, for joining us. We have another speaker for this particular application, which is the agent, Jim Kirkpatrick. Welcome, and you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee. Hopefully the button will work for you first time.
It did. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Very quickly, my name is Jim Kirkpatrick. As you know, I'm the agent for the applicants. I'd like to begin by addressing an enforcement notice that's shown in the documentation that you've got. Approximately 11 acres of this land, which is part of the 120 acres that makes up the farm, was leased to the Highways Agency when they were building the A14. There was some talk of caravan site on it. That was actually the Highways Agency had their caravans there for their recovery teams who were picking up broken down vehicles and things, and they necessarily had to be there 24 hours a day. So that's why the accommodation was there, and it's no longer there. Sorry, I've lost my plot now. The hardcore area that is there where the caravans were sitting, I think my clients intend to keep that as a storage area. They're going to remove all the electrical points, etc. But they want to keep that as a storage area. They have about 350 tons of straw every year, which they use. And that would be an ideal point to keep it with good access to other parts of the area. The area in question has been a barn. It's on a concrete hard standing and has been there since the early 80s. The hardcore that we saw in the photographs originally was laid down 1981. The Highways Agency have actually left 11 acres of concrete on the other side of the road, which they used as their base, which my clients have now got to get rid of and return back to grade 2 agricultural land. But it doesn't appear there was a problem with removing the grade 2 land when the Highways agency wanted to do it. The concrete where the existing containers are has been there for 30 years. It's not something that's been done recently. And consequently, I don't think 30-year-old concrete is really grade 2 land. My clients farm about 750 acres in the wider area, and all their farm machinery is retained in a central location. The barn was originally a grain store, but now they store all their grain in a cooperative store in March. So the barn is no longer needed as a farm building. The parish council commented that it's been there for 2 years, but actually some of the containers, the first containers, were put on site in 2002. So there's been containers on the site for 20 years, not 2 years. As far as information provided is concerned, we've not been asked to provide any additional information since validation. And this has been with the council since February 22. And until May this year, we were asked then to provide some details of the site lighting and that's what we've done. The PIR activated lights are exactly the same as you would see in any barn. I've passed several on my way up here from Kent tonight. Most barns, most farms now have these sort of lights because of the number of thefts of farm machinery and what have you. If I had more time, I'd address some of the other issues. Yes, the containers are blue because most containers you buy these days are blue, but they can be painted. The colour can be changed. As the lady councillor here said, you can't actually see them from the road or anything. It's so far away. You would have to literally be where those photographs were taken to get a good view of the containers. If you took the photographs from anywhere else round about, they're virtually invisible. But however, they could be painted.
Thank you very much.
That's me. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for our speaker? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Hello. I was going to ask you a question about the enforcement inquiry, so I'm glad that you brought that up. So in the report in front of us, there was an inquiry about the storage of caravans that are being lived in. Can I just confirm that you're identifying those as national highways rather than relating to the owner of the site?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. They were there for the highways agency had to have heavy recovery vehicles because if a truck broke down in their roadworks, they had to be able to move it quickly. Obviously, the huge backlog on roadworks in the A14 that would result if they didn't. And those crews had to be there 24 hours a day. So they provided accommodation. They would live there. The trucks were there. If a breakdown or an accident in the middle of the roadworks, they could go immediately and deal with it. That was their purpose.
Are there any other questions for this particular application? There are no other questions, so thank you for addressing the committee this evening. Moving on, are there any questions of clarification for our planning officer? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, so as far as I understand, this application is for a change of use from hard standing storage area to container storage area. Can you explain what are the major characteristic differences between those two categories of use?
The application is for change from hard standing area to container storage area. So that's the addition of the containers for storage. However, the planning history for the unit is currently agricultural land and there is no planning permissions in place for a change of use from agriculture to storage. So I have to look at the application as a fresh storage on agricultural land.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 7.17 talks about policy LP19 and would need to be in an established employment area. That's one of the conditions there. How much weight should we give to the fact that it's not connected, not in an established employment area? That would be rather difficult to do, wouldn't it? Because it's as you said, it's really outside of Godmanchester, outside of the built development.
So the established employment area is one of the tests that the proposal has to pass in order to be compliant with LP 19.
And we don't think it passes that. Is that what we're saying?
No, it doesn't pass that test.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. Just back on Councillor Devonport, raise a question briefly, please. There were a couple of points raised by the town council in their representation that I just wonder if it's helpful to give you an opportunity to speak to, and in fact raised by the agent for the applicant. One is the point that because the containers can be moved, they shouldn't be considered permanent. So whether you can comment on the extent to which there is scope for us to consider that subjectively. And the other is around the fact of there being, it's suggested for up to 30 years, the hard standing there, meaning that this shouldn't be considered agricultural land.
Just to address your first point, which regards to the permanency of the containers, there is case law. Skillet is a piece of case law about the size and permanency of a structure, which is what this has been judged under. So it would be permanent by virtue of the fact it isn't going anywhere for a very long time. Your second point, which was, if you could just remind me, sorry.
So whether the 30-year history of hard standing means that we shouldn't be considering this as agricultural land.
Yep. So essentially, hard standing could become under agricultural use as well. But as I previously said to Councillor Davenport-Ray, there is no previous applications for a change of use to storage under B1, under B class B, sorry. So therefore, I have to judge it from a fresh application.
I think that's very helpful to be clear about.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, mine's a bit what if really. So if we go along with the officers and refuse this, are the containers then removed, or does the applicant have the opportunity to do the job properly and reapply for change of use? Is that possible without removing all the containers?
So if you're minded to refuse, then the applicant can put in what's called a certificate of lawful existing development, because if they're claiming that that has been storage for over 10 years, that would be able to be immune from enforcement action. So then they could submit a certificate of lawful existing development.
Are there any other questions of clarification? I'll just bring in our Chief Planning Officer.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought it might be helpful to clarify a couple of points. You've heard tonight about the use of the land by national highways for a number of uses, whether it be hard standing or for caravans. I think most of us in the geography will be familiar with the new A14, and obviously that was several years worth of work. As part of that, we worked with national highways to identify basically the fact that they would need sites for caravans, for additional workers, areas of hard standing, where they could use their own rights under the General Permitted Development Order as a statutory body. They did. Otherwise, we worked with them and landowners to bring forward sites for temporary uses only. So where relevant, they will have either used their own statutory powers, or there will have been temporary applications, but it should not be implied or inferred that a change of use of the land on which they use has been approved in perpetuity. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification? As there are no other questions of clarification, we'll move on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion for me? Thank you, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got great sympathy for this because I'm a farming background myself, and it is the ideal use for a redundant farmyard, if you like. It's not really using any land, as all of you that have visited the site would have seen. It's basically within the boundary of the existing farm. I visited the site yesterday. It was quite busy. So there is obviously a great need for this sort of thing. And I've found it in my own district area per the Yaxley end, that where you get towns and villages established, gone of the days of 6 parked cars outside the back door. They're moving into areas such as this, container use. And in fact, 2 of them had got the doors open and they had got old vehicles they were working on in there. So, you know, that's the reason I have great sympathy for it. It's unseen, it's out of sight. It is a great benefit to the local residents in, you know, the measures that I'm talking about. Why on earth the applicant didn't apply for change of use originally is beyond my thinking, because it's so obvious that you're going to need change of use to establish something like this. So in a way, I'm minded to go down the way of refusal and hoping that the applicant, as we've been guided by the officer, goes about it the right way and does it properly and gets the road work, gets highways involved, which they will be, and do it right. But I see it that we've probably got to refuse it because that's the way I want it to go. I want the highways to get the road network right. I want us to have, you know, any add-ons, that conditions that we might need. So I can't see any other way of doing it other than refuse it and let the applicant go down that road. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford, then Councillor Saunderson.
Thank you. I think as we're all well aware, the fact that an application is retrospective can't be a factor we hold against it. But equally, the fact that it's there already can't be a factor in its favour. Which I did wonder if we, given the summary of the town council's contribution in the paper, I did wonder if that was what we were going to hear presented. But it was the distinction around there being the hard standing there for a long period of time that we heard verbally, which was helpful. But we have to consider the application that's before us as has been set out. And again, I can go with Councillor Butler that it's without to prejudge any future decision. It feels like there is scope for a farmer diversification application that hasn't been made here, given what's on the table in front of us in view of our policies around countryside, reinforced. It doesn't feel hugely weighty as a addition to the argument, but reinforced by the local, forgive me, the neighbourhood plan from God Manchester as well. I don't see we have any realistic choice but to refuse this, but with the urge that regularisation is achieved through a further application.
Councillor Saunderson.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the problems here is the applicants haven't completed or provided all the information that they need to. I think this is one of the ways that this falls down, and it doesn't seem to fit in with local plan policy number 19, as we heard earlier. I'm just interested if we were to decline this, to come back to the question that Councillor Butler asked, they could regularise this. they wouldn't necessarily need to submit a fresh application. Though, would this be an application for a certificate of lawful development? I wonder if we could just get that a little bit clarified.
Could you answer that for our councillor?
So they wouldn't have to submit a full application. A certificate of lawful existing development is determined on the balance of probabilities as to whether a use has, or in this case, a use has been commenced over 10 years. So it's more of a legal argument than a material planning.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Chair, can I just add to that? They would have to provide evidence that the use has been continuous for that period of time too. So that the onus of probability is back onto the applicant to provide that evidence as part of the application. They could come back in with a further application, a resubmission of this application with further details to be able to support it within 12 months of the date of the refusal notice, if that's the way we go, which would be free of charge in terms of a similar development. But they are the options that are available to the client. There's obviously the other option is whether or not we proceed with any action to remove the units from the site.
Thank you. Are there anybody, Councillor Jordan?
Sean, yeah. I have to agree with Councillor Butler. It's a shame. And one of the things I wrote down on this when I was listening to the very good presentation, I have to say it was very clear, was the insufficient information that hadn't come through. And I just, I was almost thinking, why did you not just do it that way? And then perhaps it would have been a much more clearer decision there tonight. I mean, we do hear about how farmers have to divert and use their land and everything, you cannot see it. It does have quite well protected as you go up to it. It's true, these pictures are taken as you're up there, because I thought I was going down the wrong track and I was suddenly going to come to this beautiful farmhouse, which I obviously didn't. But I agree with what's been said tonight, and I'm thankful for the clarification of what could help the application go forward. But I think as it's presented tonight, I have to concur with the officer's refusal. Thank you.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Chairman. In light of the comments that have gone round, I would like to propose that we go along with the officer's recommendation and refuse this. The agent is obviously here. He's heard our discussion and no doubt will act on that. If I get a seconder on that, please.
I've got several people wanting to second, but I'll take that from Councillor Jordan. In that case, we have a proposal from Councillor Butler and seconded by Councillor Jordan, a proposal to refuse this particular application. All those in favour of refusal?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's unanimous.
That's unanimous, so that is refused. We will just have a 5-minute break.
How did you find it? Good. Oh, very well. Heard you say the King's College. I happened to just walk past it the other day. Is there? Yeah. On a purpose. Why not?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, that's the thing. Normally, this looks really good.
Historically. The only thing. Not sure that the range of stuff to be
well, it's judicial abuse.
Probably is. Where is more helpful for us? It's kind of like one of those big ways. An inspector can say, yeah, precedent that a decision made by another council. You kind of use not sign the fee. I not TJR, not.
But if they go to the council.
It's almost up so high, such high power. Pretty much, yeah. Or point. So, whereas some more two-story works where they're second from that last. Wouldn't. That's almost like. Our money is risk. Yeah. Somebody else. Yeah. But at the same time too. That's where people are allocated. You have a so these might that area. But isn't it well, you see from the previous one, you have the issue of I know one so like but I outside the issue, you know, Alan, you have to looking at a quite substantial that's pretty much it's what I can see I've got emails about that's where the people was going well, so I need to open it. It's kind of hard. I can get somebody else now. I'm gonna have to get some. I'll have to speak to them. I need the conversation. That's very much that's not a question. PCO Yeah, I think someone
And welcome back to the meeting. We'll continue with the meeting and we will move on to our last item, which is Neem Valley Railway. And we have our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson, speaking on this particular application. And within our packs, it's on page 97 to 114.
Thank you, Chair. So the site is Wansford Station, Great North Road, Sibbenton. The proposal is construction of a dual-use cycle and pedestrian path from Sutton Village across the meadows to Ninth Valley Railway Station at Sibbenton. This would be approximately 900 metres in length. The constructed path would form part of a longer cycle route, mainly on public roads from Ellsworth to the station. So the map in front of you, you can see in black outline is the application site. So just to give some context, so this application is referred to committee because it offers a recommendation of approval. It's contrary to the parish council recommendation of refusal. Sibbenton Parish Council are opposed to the application on grounds of major flooding issues, and the cycle path extending beyond Sutton has been refused. Members should note that we contacted the parish council advising that the application in Peterborough was granted that appeal, and this is only for a small area of hard standing, but the parish council still object on flooding grounds. So just to give some further context, so you can see the site comprises a dismantled railway line between the southern end of Lovers Lane in Sibbenton and Wansford Station. It largely follows established field boundary before crossing the River Nine, close to the railway station. This application relates to the unserviced informal path between the pedestrian bridge and the old Great North Road. Both the bridge and signal box are Grade 2 listed, and the site is in flood zone 1. That's just an aerial view of the site. Okay, so this is a cross-boundary application with most of the works falling within the local authority area of Peterborough City Council. The project proposes the construction of a dual-use cycle and pedestrian path from Sutton Village to the north, across the meadows to Ninth Valley Railway Station at Sibbenton. So you can see on your screen in front of you, so on the left-hand side is the plan for the Peterborough City Council application. You've got an aerial image to the right, and you can kind of see the curved hedge that follows the same, just here. And then just on the right-hand side, you can see it's just here. And then we are dealing with just here inside our district. So just to expand on the Peterborough, so we are dealing with the very final part of the route, but the majority was in Peterborough. So the majority of the works were submitted to Peterborough City Council in July 2020. And then we received an application in Jan 21. Then in July 2021, Peterborough City Council application was refused at committee, which was a member overturn due to the increase of cyclists leading to highway safety / amenity impacts, and also the visual impact of tarmac on the character of the village. Then last year in July, the Peterborough City Council application was allowed at appeal. And then of course we're here now looking at this application. So you can see some time has passed, but it was dependent on the outcome of the Peterborough City Council application, which is for the majority of the works. So this is a plan in front of you, which is just showing the extent of the works, just where my mouse is here. It'll become much clearer as I move to the photos. So the area we're looking at as part of this application, if you can see my mouse, it's just here. It's literally from that point to here. As I said, this is the final part of the route, which is within our district. So this application seeks plan permission for the servicing works to widen and level out the unserviced informal path between the pedestrian bridge and the old Great North Road. The path is to be 2.5 meters wide, constructed with tarmac. So the main issue is flood risk, which is what the parish council objected on. So the application site's in flood zone 1 and is therefore at the low risk of flooding. The proposed development only includes a small area of tarmac. Officers also note that the planning inspector considered flood risk for the rest of the scheme under Peterborough City Council, and paragraph 6 of that appeal decision says that the proposal complies with local and national planning policy, is categorised as a water compatible development and would not increase the risk of flooding elsewhere, and the site can be appropriately drained. Officers obviously note the concerns raised by the parish council, especially when considering the Peterborough City Council application, but taking it all into account, including the size and nature of the proposal, the relevant planning history, and the fact the site is in flood zone 1, officers consider the proposal will be acceptable in terms of flood risk in accordance with policy LP5. The officer recommendation is approval subject to the conditions outlined in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. For this particular proposal, we have one speaker, and that's the applicant, Andrew Nash. Would you like to come and address the committee? You have, yes, please, and you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee. If you press the middle button, hopefully it should work straight away.
Oh, good evening, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to the meeting tonight. My name is Andrew Nash. I live in Aylesworth, which is just to the west of Peterborough. I will be brief. I'm the chair of a small voluntary group called Peterborough Cycle West. As I said, we stress we are all volunteers and none of us get any financial gain from this whole project in any way at all. We're basically cyclists and local people who club together to try and improve the cycle network in our area. The major problem was that from the west of Peterborough, there is no safe cycle route towards the A1 and over across into either Northamptonshire or Huntingdonshire. And so over the last 10 years, we raised over £20,000 to try and pay for the design and then the application for such a route. This mainly, as you've heard tonight, would be almost entirely within the Peterborough City Council area. And I'm only here tonight to talk to you about a very small aspect of it, which is in your area. Okay, the major route would come from the village of Sutton, southwards on a disused railway line, curving through the fields, and then off the railway line for a short distance until it reached a new set of steps up towards the Nene Valley Railway's footbridge over the Nene, and at the other end of the footbridge would be Huntingdonshire. We, as you've heard, we made our application to Peterborough in the summer of 2021. And despite a very lengthy report from Peterborough's officers recommending approval, the committee at Peterborough turned us down, much to my disappointment. Because of the many issues that we felt prompted the need for such a route, we of course applied to the Planning Inspectorate on appeal. And I'm very pleased to say that, again, after a very lengthy and full examination of all the issues, the Planning Inspectorate reversed the decision by Peterborough City Council and granted us planning application. And that's why I've come back to you tonight, as I said, for this very small aspect of it, which relates to Huntingdonshire. The basic, as you've seen, the basic thing in Huntingdonshire is at the end of the footbridge. As you go to the other bank of the River Nene, we're asking for a few very small things, and these are shown on pages 113 and 114 of the report that's in front of you. All we're asking for is a small area of tarmac to be set down, approximately the size of one car parking space, and then the erection of a small length of fencing to separate that from the car parking spaces to the right side of it. If you look at one of the photographs, which has got the car in it, you can see a small area of grassland with a post in it. That would be the area which would be flattened and which would be replaced with tarmac up to the fence. And the purpose of that area is to allow cyclists approaching from the Huntingdon side to dismount from their bikes and let anybody who's on the footbridge come across without causing any problem. The existing pole would also need to be resited to allow it be put in a slightly different place, and perhaps a sign could be erected on it, such as cyclists dismount or give way to pedestrians on the footbridge, something like that. So that's basically all we're asking for. One condition has been asked for, which is that we should submit any final design to Cambridgeshire Highways for approval before construction, and we of course would go along with that. So all I can say is we've had a very good report from your own officers recommending approval. I would urge you to go along with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so we will thank you very much for joining us and addressing us, and we will move on to any questions of clarification for our planning officers. Are there any questions of clarification? There's no questions of clarification, so we will move on to the discussion, and thank you, Councillor Wakeford, for starting that discussion.
Thank you. Very pleasant to have heard from the applicant, though I am frankly a little embarrassed that we've required you to come here this evening at all on the basis purely of an objection from Parish Council that isn't here, and the single material planning consideration that could conceivably cause us to refuse this, as have been clarified by officers, has no basis, and there's no flooding risk to the area at all. I saw other hands, so I won't make a proposal at this point, but I am very strongly minded to vote in favour of this, though my mind remains open as ever.
Councillor Goulson, and then I've got Councillor Ray, and then Councillor Sanson.
I think, as was just mentioned, it's a very simple one. This is 2.5 metres wide and about 5 metres long. It's about time we got more people out in the countryside walking, rock cycling and so on like this, and this is a very small contribution to do that, and I am prepared to put my name and propose this acceptance.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I'm really interested to hear in such an ambitious scheme that clearly follows some of our strategic objectives for Huntingdonshire. And so I would like to second the motion. My family greatly enjoys visiting the area, and I look forward to cycling there too.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second Councillor Goulson's proposal that we approve this application. There's scant information from the parish council. They mentioned flooding. Oh, so it was yourself, was it? Or, oh, sorry, I do apologise. I jumped in there. I'd scan information from the parish council. They say flooding, but they don't really provide any details behind it. We've heard from our officer team, so happy to support this.
Councillor Tevlin.
There we go. I'd just like to say that yeah, it's quite a simple one, and that it's good to see LP what was it, LP 16 sustainable travel sort of being incorporated with this, and yeah, the need for safer pavements. I think it's important, and the safety aspect of that. So again, I support this. Thank you.
Councillor McAdams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was initially going to second the proposal, but that's already done. I went with Councillor Sanderson to have a look at this the other day, and quite frankly, can't see any problem with it whatsoever why we shouldn't approve it. So I will be approving it. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, we have Councillor Goulson with a proposal to approve, and we have Councillor Davenport-Ray and Councillor Sanderson seconding, but I will take Councillor Davenport-Ray's second. All those in favour of approval for this particular application, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
And that is unanimous, so that has been approved. Moving on to our next item on the agenda. Item 4, appeal decision, and we will receive a report from our planning service manager.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 items to report to members this month. One is an appeal against non-determination, which was dismissed by the inspectorate. The second one was an appeal in St Ives, which was a delegated recommendation of refusal on an application due to residential amenity grounds. The inspector disagreed with the planning officer's assessment associated with the impact that it would have on the neighbouring dwelling and allowed the appeal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say thank you to our planning officers for all the hard work that you put into these applications that come before us. And thank you, councillors, for joining in the discussion. I bring this meeting to an end.